Okay, I'm C.W. Mayberry, and this is Bible 101, picking up in Genesis chapter 5. Again, this is a primer, a basic through the Bible study to give you a background, a foundation for deeper things. It is raw and uncut. It is as it is. It will not be edited. Any errors, mistakes, or faux pas remain. All right. And then we need Genesis chapter 5 and verse 1, which reads, "This is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created him. In the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, Anthropos Adam, mankind. In the day when they were created, and Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth." So this is the son that is born as a replacement for Abel, whom Cain slew. That gives you a time factor of 130 years, in which all the events up to the slaying of Abel took place, and then slightly thereafter. "And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth, were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters." So you only have given individuals being named and pointed out. We don't know how many sons and daughters were born before. We don't know that there weren't sons and daughters born to Adam prior to or before the fall, before the introduction of sin. The sin of Cain and his separation from the rest of the family unit and the people he was a part of constitutes the beginning of a separate bloodline, really. And it is the dark bloodline, the evil bloodline. Although all men at this point forward are tainted by sin, this is the foundation in Cain of really what would become Babylon, what would become Egypt, what would become the present wicked kingdoms of this world. The culture, all of it is passed down one after the other. You can only reach so far back into antiquity, but it's a pretty safe bet that the things that we know would continue farther back if you had greater and clearer information. All right. Verse 4, "And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Adam, and all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died." And that seems kind of incredible in today's world. We don't see anybody living really past 80, 90, 100 years old. We're amazed at that. But when you look at what the Bible teaches, what the Bible demonstrates, the fact that there is a supernatural God that identifies with this book and can enter your life in a very palpable way, coupled with the history of this world, you begin to understand how really possible it is. All right. Men, after sin entered in, began to degenerate. The genetic code began to break down. You and I are the product of 6,000 years of corruption, of degradation, mentally, psychologically, intellectually, physically, and have our limitations. From the Bible, you would glean an understanding that Adam and those like him were living nearly 1,000 years. They were probably in the order of 10 feet tall, somewhere around 360 pounds of lean muscle mass, highly intelligent, far more than we are now. And just ask yourself, if a being lived that long and was that intelligent and that strong, what could they achieve? what kind of world would they set up? Because all that came into being. We have very little record of it today because people don't want to think about it. The people in academia, the people that would do the research really don't want to look into it. They've got a different worldview that's counter to it, and they don't want to know. But if you go to Google and you search megalithic construction, you're going to find the remnants of buildings that were built out of stone with incredible precision, sometimes using, no, not sometimes, all the time using stones that were 30 tons, 60 tons, stones the size of 14, 15 automobiles. Who built those? Where did they come from? Where did they get the technology to cut a stone, to shape a stone to the point where you can't get a human hair between the two of them, to the point where water has not eroded and destroyed them? They seal so well. I would suggest to you that from Adam and Cain, civilization stretched out across this earth and went from what we would now call continent to continent, though there probably weren't separate continents. It was probably a single continent is what the book suggests. And they had a culture that spread globally from east to west. No cavemen. And as that culture became more and more corrupt, it became necessary basically to purge it from the earth because they were going to destroy themselves. All right. That's a lot to drop in there, but just something to think about. Verse 6, and Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years and begat sons and daughters. Again, a lot of population, but no real identification of all these people. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died, almost 1,000 years old. And Enos lived 900 years and begat Canaan. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalalel. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalalel 840 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 65 years and begat Jared. And Mahalalel lived after he begat Jared 830 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Verse 17. And it can be quite boring to read begat. The real point of all that, or at least one point, is the maintenance of a genealogical line, so you can go back and you can tell time. The Jews actually trace this back, and counting generation by generation, come up with a number of about 6,000 years. That's all the time that human beings have been on this planet, irregardless of what science falsely called so tells you. All right? Become a student of this book, and you'll know more truth than science is ever willing to tell you. Because to be honest about science is to be honest about the fact that there is a God to be dealt with at the end of your life. And people don't want to face that. They don't want to deal with that. They'd rather turn their head from it and live the way they want to live. 17, and all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And Jared lived 162 years and begat Enoch. And Jared lived after he begat Enoch 800 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. That's much shorter than anybody else up to this point. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's a mysterious piece of scripture. What in the world does it mean? Really, it means he lived his life in such accordance and agreement with the things of God that God saw fit to remove him. That's what it means. And that's really what we're hoping for. When you've fulfilled your race, you can get out of here too. Obviously, I'm still here. Pray for me. And Methuselah lived 108 and 7 years and begat Lamech. All right. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 708 and 2 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 802 years and begat a son, and he called his name Noah. At this point, we are now 2,445 years, give or take, from the beginning, from Adam. Almost 2,500 years have passed in these 5 chapters. So there's a great compression of history here. How far would society have gone? How far would science have advanced when people advancing it, learning it for their own benefit, are living hundreds of years? If you were a musician, how good would you be at that occupation after 100 years, 200 years, 300 years? These people were highly advanced. These people achieve things that we still don't really understand the nature of today. As far as construction, the things they were able to do, it's because they were quite different beings than we are. All right. Where did I leave off? 28. And Lamech lived 180 and 2 years and begat a son, called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil for our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. Think about that. Adam has got to struggle because of the sin in his life, and what was once easy is now going to become difficult. Producing fruit, producing grain, producing anything needed to sustain life is now going to become work. The same thing happens even to a greater degree with Cain. It's just impossible for him to. And in this verse 29, says, And he called his name Noah, saying, The same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which Jehovah hath cursed. They're still 2,500 years out looking for Messiah. They're still looking for a Savior. They're still looking for one to come to deliver them from the state that they are living in, the hardness, the difficulty of life. This did not start yesterday. This is from the time that Adam fell and that first atonement was made. There's a looking forward, which means there's a telling of it from generation to generation to generation to generation. It's common knowledge, which means there is, I don't want to use the word religion, but there is a system in place to signify an individual and a society, a group of people's agreement with and involvement with Jehovah God. There to signify and to show and to demonstrate a willingness to be in covenant, that is a legal binding agreement between the two with God, and a system of worship. I don't want to really call it religion, because religion is a horrible thing, but and annual observances, things that signify I'm aware. This is why you remember your anniversary. This is why you bring those things up, because it signifies that you are still aware, that you still care, that you're still involved. It shows who you are. Okay. There we go. Verse 30, And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. So now these numbers are coming down. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These are the 3 individuals from which all peoples on the earth today are descended. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right. Where are we at for time here? It's only 15 minutes into this. I'm going to keep going. I had not intended to, but we shall. This chapter 6, verse 1 is something you need to get a hold of and understand. Many, many people have taken this one verse and twisted it to mean some pretty perverse things. There are people who profess it. There are books have been written about it. And in my opinion, it is all in error. Let me read it to you. And it came to pass when men began to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took them wives of all which they chose. And what is commonly taught by these people is that these sons of God are angelic beings that took wives of human beings, and these children of that offspring became basically the dominant figures on the landscape of humanity. Okay, number one, if that is true, why didn't Lucifer try to seduce Eve as opposed to just trying to talk her into being involved with fruit, and the eating thereof? Why don't we see this going on today? I mean, we have capital punishment for certain crimes in this nation. You create this, you commit this heinous crime, and they put you to death. There are people who are on death row right now waiting for their execution. There are people who have been executed, and there are still people committing that crime, or those crimes. And there are still demonic forces at work in this world. If you don't believe that, go buy yourself a newspaper any day of the week. Why aren't they doing that if it's possible? Why don't they continue to do it? They've really got nothing more to lose. They're already cursed. It's like a man on death row. He's got nothing to lose. You can't take any more from him. His end is already the totality of negativity. It couldn't get any worse, so why not? Well, the reason they don't do it is because angels have no physical procreative power or ability. They never did. They never will. They are spirit beings. They've never had children. Okay, there's no mention of angels producing angels anywhere. They are created beings, which means, what is a created being? A created being is a being that comes into existence out of nothing, without a process. It is full, whole, and entire the moment it comes into existence. Human beings were not created. Human beings were made. Human beings are part of a process. I am still in the process of being made. The Apostle Paul, I believe, said, it does not yet appear what we shall be, but when we see him, that is Messiah, we shall be like him. Okay, and it tells us also that this mortal body must put off mortality, and that we must take on the nature of Messiah at his coming, or at our own resurrection. So we are in a process where you're not created. These angels are, they're whole and entire. Jesus, when being questioned by the Sadducees about the requirements of the law for a man to raise up seed unto his brother's wife should his brother die, asked, in the resurrection, whose wife is she? And the reply is, you do err not knowing the scriptures. Okay, because in the resurrection, men and women do not marry, or not given in marriage. Life does not go on like it does here. There is no more biological procreative process. But human beings, he says, are like the angels. There's never been a procreative process. Any individual that teaches you this, you're typically going to find has got a problem with perversion, with lust, with sex outside of the boundaries that God put it in. All right, and there's a spirit associated with it. People seem to enjoy it, seem to fantasize about it, but it is not so. So. And look again at the word. It says the sons of God, and they will tell you that, well, that means angels. Well, in the first chapter of the Gospel of John, it says that Yeshua gave as many as believed on him power, I believe that is both ability and authority, to become what? The sons of God. And in the genealogy listed from Yeshua back to Adam, it lists Adam as being the son of God. Okay? No angels involved. No supernatural beings involved there. The term son of God does not necessarily mean an angel. It can, but it is not exclusive. So to take all that information and to paint this picture and create this false narrative of, the Nephilim, the giants returning someday, is not true. So who are the sons of God? I'm personally of the opinion that they are children born to Adam and Eve before the fall, before sin, people who had not had their DNA corrupted by sin. They began to intermarry with those who had, and in doing so, they corrupted themselves in their own bloodline. And being that, at least in my opinion, the reproduction rate of humanity after the fall was increased, they eventually expired. They were eventually outbred. And there's some suggestion that in some parts of the world they were hunted down and killed for whatever reason. And there's an entire area. You can get into that, but it's not going to get you into heaven, and it won't keep you out of hell. But angels do not produce offspring with human beings. These are the sons of Adam born before the fall, which were highly more intelligent, a great deal stronger, a great deal larger. Okay? And when they interbred, they produced individuals that stood out. When you talk about that today, obviously physically there was a difference to some degree. The counting of the years of the lives of these people will indicate that the corruption was slow, and at this point the interbreeding of the two would not be difficult. They were still quite similar. All right. I mean, today a man 10 feet tall marrying a woman who's 4'11", it could be an issue as far as childbirth goes. Almost two separate species. But in that day, it would not have been, not for some time. And as far as being great men, which we're going to read this in just a minute, men of renown, I mean, friend, look at the musical geniuses today. Look at the scientific geniuses today. Look at the Albert Einsteins, the Isaac Newtons, people of profound mental ability compared to the average person. Those are giants. That's where the seed went. That's where the remnant of it is. Okay, is in the intellect and the ability to lead, the MacArthurs, the Pattons, things of that nature. And we will continue on. Verse 2, just to recap, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. And really, I didn't see it before. I believe that's referring back to the sons of God here. They decided to interbreed, and God grieved with that. They are still pure. They are still undefiled, and yet they defiled themselves with interbreeding with this diseased race. Okay? Yet his days shall be 120 years. That's what God's guaranteeing. Up to this point, people are still living multiple 100-year periods. Okay, in verse 4, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown, kings, rulers, leaders, that eventually were bred out of existence. You still see them showing up in Goliath, of David and Goliath, of one of the kings that's in the land when Israel comes out of Egypt and into what would be the promised land. There's still a remnant of these people at that point. All right. And God saw, verse 5, the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, which is where we are now, really. And it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. So God is grieved over what man has become. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found grace. Just in case you don't know, there's a huge argument that goes on about law and grace. We're not under the law. We don't have to keep Torah because we're under grace. So, friend, here's grace in the 6th chapter of the book of the 6th chapter of the first book. In what? Verse number 8. That's pretty early on. Noah's finding grace. Grace is not a new concept. All right? Grace does not negate the law. Grace is necessary because we can't keep the law. The law itself is grace because it forestalls judgment. It keeps judgment away from us. It rolls it ahead until the point that it can be sufficiently dealt with. Because a holy God coming into the presence of sin demands judgment. And judgment for us would be total annihilation. But he's put something in place to forestall that for those who will take advantage of it. You have to take advantage of it. That is grace. Grace is already at work here. Grace was at work the day that those animals were slain to provide skins to cover Adam and Eve. Grace was at work there. So grace is not a new concept. All right. Verse 9, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, which means he walked after God. He sought things. Does not mean he was without flaw, but he was continually mindful toward God, the things of God, which again tells you there had to be something codified. There had to be something, not necessarily codified, but something passed down, something known, something communicated, some body of law in existence. You can't communicate what is not known. All right. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which we talked about earlier. The earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So there are no cavemen. There are people who have lived in caves, but the whole idea of a period of time where everybody was living in a cave is completely erroneous. Mankind spread out east to west, north to south. If you look at archaeology, there is a band that starts in what we call the Middle East and reaches east and west, and that's where you find the greatest majority of ancient ruins, megalithic being the oldest, and then those coming after it. And then as you go north and south, those ruins become less and less. That tells you started off with the population somewhere in the center, and it spread out going east and west. It doesn't take much to figure that out. All right. Verse 12, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. That's going to be the sons of God born to Adam prior to sin, and those born after. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them from the earth. There comes a point where society, nationally, globally, has become so wicked and so debased that God is going to move and wipe it out. We've seen this more than one time, and we're living on the edge of it now. Be prepared, my friend, because the days that we are living in are going to get very, very hairy. You better know God. You better have a relationship. You better have an understanding, a kinship, a dependence upon, a fondness for, an intimacy with. How else can I say it? You've got to know him above everything else. You've got to be honest with him above everyone else, and to include yourself. All right. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without. And this is the fashion from which thou shalt make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. I'm not going to go into all that, but basically it's the size of a super tanker. Okay? A window shalt thou make to the ark. and a cubit shalt thou finish above it, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side of it, and set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, and people talk all the time about how impossible this would have been. You couldn't keep all these animals in there. Go search out Kinham, and the replica they built. I believe that's in Kansas, and look into their materials. You're going to find out it's very doable. It is completely doable. All right, and they prove it quite soundly. Verse 16, a window shalt thou make in the ark, and the cubits shall finish it. Okay, verse 17, and behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth. Hadn't rained until this point. Remember back in the days of Adam, it said a mist rose up. And behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. Why in the world would God reserve rain and then use rain in order to destroy these people? He brings in something people have never seen. Noah is no doubt proclaiming that these things are going to happen, and people are probably like water from the sky. We've never seen that. We don't believe you. Not only are you telling us something incredible, you're telling it's going to happen to us by incredible means. Well, the point of all that is to instill in the mind of people that God is God. I mean, he can make it rain unicorns tomorrow if he so desires, as silly as that sounds. Amen and amen. Verse 17, and behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under the heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee I will establish my what? Covenant, agreement. It obligates him and you. Noah, you got a job to do. You got to go out here and build this boat. That's part of the covenant that shows that you believe it. Okay, it's just like the words of Yeshua, hear and obey, Shema. Hear and obey. If you hear and don't obey, you don't believe. And Noah enters into a covenant with God that involves building his boat. All right? Behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life, and from under the heavens, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee I will establish my covenant. God is a covenant God. You don't just believe on Jesus or Yeshua and waltz on in any old way you want to. There's a program. And thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons and thy wife with thee. The Torah is an ark. You live within the parameters of it, and it will save your soul. Jesus is the Torah on feet. He's the living Torah. All right. And every living thing of all flesh, and of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. So these are breeding pairs. They shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, and of the cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. Two of every sort shall come into thee to keep them alive. These are wild beasts, unclean. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten in grain, and thou shalt go gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. These commands constitute a Torah. The Torah is the covenant. Keeping of the covenant preserves life. It's that simple. We're going to stop there and pick up at chapter 7 next time. And I understand if you've never read this stuff, if you're completely alien to it, it seems rather fantastic. But as you begin to involve yourself with the God of this book, the supernatural is going to begin to occur in your life if you have any inclination toward holiness, righteousness, purity, what is decent at all. It will begin to happen. I say it. God will begin to manifest himself in your life, in your mind, in your body, in your house, in your car. And it won't seem so strange then. you become accustomed to the operation of the supernatural, and then you get to the point where you don't want to live without it. Not feeling God for a day or two really causes you a great deal of concern. Great and mighty God, in the name of Yeshua Mashiach, the soon and coming King, I pray for everyone that has heard what has been said here today, and everyone that will across time and geography. Move in the hearts and the minds of people to prepare them for the day that is coming, that they should be worthy to enter into the kingdom at your return to this world, that they should know truth for themselves, that they should have the presence of mind to ingest this word themselves, to ingrain it into their very being, not just take it as something someone else has said and that they have heard, but to take ownership of it. In the name of Yeshua Mashiach,